What's up, Daily Dieter? Thursday, March 14th. And we could talk Warriors. I mean, I don't really know what to say off of last night's game. You don't have Draymond Green. You don't have Steph Curry. You put in a pretty solid performance, but you couldn't put the ball in the basket. You can only ask so much from Jonathan Kuminga at this point in his career. They lost the game. Everything goes in to Saturday's game against the Lakers, and it sure looks like this team's going to be playing in the play-in tournament. That's the cut and drive at the sweet and short part of it. We could get more into it later. Appreciate everyone who joins in. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, please subscribe on YouTube. It'd be greatly appreciated. If you want to get in any comments, throw them on the show. I'd appreciate that as well. You can do that here on X. You can do that here on YouTube, wherever you're watching us. Appreciate you doing so. Let's talk about a column I just posted on the Mercury News website. And I think a storyline that is going to have some serious run for the next little bit, because when it hit my inbox a couple days ago, it's obviously been something we've been discussing in concept for a couple of months, if not really since Deebo Samuel signed his new contract. Like, what is the end point for Deebo Samuel with the San Francisco 49ers? And if I'm calling the shots, I think if the Niners were smart about this, the end point is June 1st, 2024. And that's the first day that you can trade Deebo Samuel and get some serious salary cap relief. And that's a day that you can trade Deebo Samuel and give Brandon Ayuk whatever money you want. And those two things are not one and the same. You can give Brandon Ayuk number one wide receiver money and pay Deebo Samuel number one wide receiver money at the same time. But that doesn't mean that you should. And Jason La Canfora, longtime NFL insider, comes out with a report yesterday or today that said that the Baltimore Ravens called about Deebo Samuel. There's a million cold calls happening right now. The vast majority won't turn into anything. And as far as I can tell, the 49ers are not interested right now in trading Deebo Samuel. But I think that's incorrect. I think they should be listening. And while you can't really make the move for salary cap purposes until after June 1st, and while you do firmly believe, and you should, that your Super Bowl window is open for 2024 and 2025, 2 years Deebo Samuel is under contract, I think that this is the time to strike when it comes to getting rid of Deebo Samuel. And it's not because Deebo Samuel wasn't a great player, not because he wasn't an impact player. His Super Bowl was not very good, but he was injured. It's because you go to the wisdom of Bill Walsh. You'd rather be a year too early than a year too late. And I think we know that the end is coming for Deebo Samuel sooner rather than later. 2021 is ancient history. 2021 had a different quarterback. It was 3 quarterbacks ago, or 2, depending on how you look at it. It was a different world. It was a different offense. And the Deebo Samuel who had that 2021 season, which is as impressive and as incredible as any season I've seen with my own 2 eyes in any sport, the run that he had for when the Niners started, I think it was 3-5 that year, all the way to the NFC Championship game, was truly spectacular. And he deserved every penny of the contract the 49ers subsequently gave him. But stuff has changed. And now you have a true number one receiver in Brandon Ayuk. You have a true number one receiver as your ex-receiver in Brandon Ayuk. And if we know one thing about Kyle Shanahan, it's that he, in his true offense, feeds the ex-receiver. We're talking Andre Johnson. We're talking Julio Jones. We're even talking Andrew Hawkins with the Cleveland Browns the one year Kyle Shanahan was there. The X receiver should be the go-to, the true number one in a Kyle Shanahan offense. And it was last year with Brock Purdy as his quarterback. And it was when Brock Purdy took over as the 49ers quarterback in week 13 of 2022. Deebo Samuel was a number one receiver for a Jimmy Garoppolo-led team. And he was spectacular. My God, what a stallion. But Jimmy Garoppolo as a quarterback, and I hate to relitigate all this, I hate to bring it back up because we talked so much about it for years. It became a shtick almost for me. But Jimmy Garoppolo's game was snap the ball, get it out of your hands, one read, and that read was over the middle to Deebo Samuel. That read was over the middle to George Kittle. He didn't throw outside the numbers. Sometimes he didn't throw outside the hash marks. He wanted to get the ball to his number one receiver, the Z receiver, Deebo Samuel, in space over the middle so that Deebo could go to work. And Deebo went to work. It got to the point where the Niners just used him as a running back. Why throw when you can just hand it to the guy and he can do work? That was the Deebo Samuel the 49ers needed then. It's a nice player to have, unquestionably, for Brock Purdy and the 49ers today. But in terms of need, I don't think that the 49ers need Deebo Samuel the way that they used to need Deebo Samuel. I know they'll be a worse team if they trade Deebo Samuel this upcoming offseason, but I can't tell you how much worse they'll be. No one can. It's a guess. At the same time, this is a number two receiver that you're paying number one wide receiver money to. And the last couple of years, it didn't really matter that much because the last couple of years, Deebo Samuel's cap hit 2022, $6.8 million. Fine. That's 3% of the cap. This past year, 3.7% of the cap, $8.7 million. And now we get into the real numbers. $28 million for next season. I might think that the salary cap is fake. It's all funny money. It doesn't matter, whatever. But you're paying Deebo Samuel almost 10% of the salary cap to be your number two receiver to Brandon Ayuk. Is he an incredible weapon, a one-of-one, an idiosyncratic player? Absolutely. Are you better for having him on your team? Absolutely. But how many more great years of Deebo Samuel are you going to get? Are you even going to get another great year of Deebo Samuel? Or is he your number two receiver that you're paying number one receiver money to? Bill Walsh, better to be a year too early than a year too late. If they wait a year to trade Deebo Samuel, I don't think there's much of a return. We saw the attrition that his body took throughout this season as the number two receiver. He was not around really for the playoffs. Now, he had a great second half against the Detroit Lions, and that was vital. But it wasn't just him. He was a tone setter, all this stuff. He's clearly a very good football player. So much so that I think they can get a first-round pick for him after June 1st, a 2025 first-round pick for him. And someone will take a nice chunk of his contract. Maybe it's the Baltimore Ravens. Maybe it's another team. There are a lot of teams that want and need a true number one receiver. He'd be pretty sick in the Baltimore offense. He would be. But how much longer can you count on Deebo Samuel to be a big-time impact player when his role is decreasing and his time on the field is decreasing too? And now you have to pay him big money and Brandon Ayuk big money. I have no problem with paying top players top dollar, and Deebo Samuel earned every penny of the contract that he got. But there's no other team in football, and I think for very good reason, that's paying two guys top dollar. No other team in football that's doing that. And in fact, trading number one wide receivers, or at least, number one in quotation marks, I suppose in this case, is a very common thing. Devontae Adams got traded for a first and a second. Now, the Packers were a year too early as opposed to a year too late there, but they're looking pretty good these days. How are the Raiders doing? Now, maybe that's not a fair comparison because it's one of the best run organizations in all sports and one of the worst run organizations in all sports, but the point stands. Stephon Diggs caught the biggest catch, had the biggest play in Minnesota Vikings history. They got rid of him. They sent him to Buffalo, who needed a number one receiver and overpaid for him, not just in capital, but also in the contract. And yes, there was a good year or two, but where was Stephon Diggs last year? He was not an impact player, at least in my estimation. The best football we've seen from Stephon Diggs is behind him. And the Vikings got off of it early. And what did they do that same draft? They took Justin Jefferson. That looks like it's working out pretty well for them. Hell, they might even move Justin Jefferson this year. They'll probably take another guy. Tyreek Hill gets traded, and maybe Patrick Mahomes isn't a good case study. But the Chiefs trade Tyreek Hill and win the Super Bowl in back-to-back years. Now, they had some receiver issues this past year, but they had a true number one, and his name was Travis Kelce in both of those seasons. There's an irony to the fact that guys are getting more and more money at the receiver position because it is vitally important in this new all-pass NFL. Guys are getting crazy money, and guys are really pushing the limits of how much they can ask for, kind of getting back into diva wide receiver territory, which is going to be fun to experience this upcoming season. Right at the same time that they're arguably most replaceable. The last couple of years, there has been a clear trend in the NFL draft. One is offensive linemen suck. Unless you get like one of the top two guys, they usually suck. And you are just begging to get lucky if you're drafting an offensive lineman outside of like the top 15. That is a problem with the college game. They're not teaching real offensive line play as it pertains to the NFL. But the flip side of that is, my God, they can produce some receivers at the college level right now. LSU is going to have two guys who go in the top like 20. Every year, it is just absolutely loaded at wide receiver. And the 49ers have pick number 31 in this upcoming draft. Now, my suggestion, if you trade Deebo Samuel, is you get a 2025 first. And a part of that is just the timing. You have to trade him after June 1st. So you can't do anything for this upcoming draft. But if you use pick number 31 for a Z wide receiver, you could do a whole lot worse. If you replace Deebo Samuel with pick number 31, I think you're in pretty good stead. They're not going to be Deebo Samuel. No one's Deebo Samuel. But they might kind of fit the offense better. They might kind of make more sense for the 49ers. It certainly would remove, getting rid of Deebo Samuel would remove somewhat of a crutch for Kyle Shanahan in the offense. I mean, when in doubt, what does he do? He schemes open Deebo Samuel. That's a really, really nice option to have. I don't know how much longer the 49ers will reasonably have it. And honestly, it limits Kyle Shanahan's creativity a bit. He falls back to the safety blanket again and again and again. And I'm not sure Deebo Samuel doesn't have a bunch of holes in him as a safety blanket. I'm not sure he can keep you warm anymore. I don't. And maybe he can for this upcoming season. But then what? Are you going to ride out this Deebo Samuel contract? Are you going to see this thing all the way to fruition? Because then he walks in free agency. You get a third-round comp pick if you're lucky. You have to pay Brock Purdy, and you don't have a number 2 receiver. Now you're having to draft out of desperation and need. Now you don't have a couple of shots at this thing if you get it wrong the first time. By the way, you have a number 1 receiver in Brandon Ayuk. You have your guy. Deebo Samuel was the guy. Brandon Ayuk steps into that role now. He makes more sense in this offense. He makes more sense fiscally. He makes more sense with his age. I think Brandon Ayuk can be a very good player for the length of his contract. I don't think Deebo Samuel is going to live up to what the 49ers are going to have to pay him the next 2 years. I don't think he lived up to that standard this past season. And I can't imagine things are going to get better from here. Not with the way he plays the game. He's here for a very good time, not for a long time. And I'm looking at South Carolina wide receiver. I'll just pull it up for you. Share the screen here real fast. I mean, this Xavier Legette guy, holy shit. I mean, this guy's awesome. Just gets the ball and zoop. This is a guy who can go at the end of the first round. We're talking Keon Coleman out of Florida State. That's a guy who could go at the end of the first round. Tez Walker out of North Carolina. These all three of those guys a decade ago, half a decade ago, would have been top 15 picks. They're that good. They're that good. And as number 2 receivers, they make all the sense in the world. These guys are future number 1s. These guys are awesome. Again, top 15 picks not long ago. But the wide receiver classes are so stacked year in and year out that you can maybe even get 1 or 2 of these guys in the second round. It's absurd. It's absurd how good these wide receivers are at the college level right now. And so, yes, Deebo Samuel would be a win for you in 2024. He's still an outstanding player, an impact player, positive player. You want to have a guy like that on your team for 2024. But if you keep him around for 2024, is he still going to be that guy for you in 2025? And then where are the 49ers once that contract expires? What do they have to say for riding out the downturn of Deebo Samuel's career? You can get a first-round pick for him this offseason. I guarantee it. Now, it'd be after June 1st, so it'd be a 2025 first-round pick. But you can maximize your return on Deebo Samuel this offseason. And I think the 49ers should take it because the game is shifting under Deebo Samuel's feet. Not that, again, he will be an impact, positive player, great player. Your Super Bowl chances go down when you lose him, but by how much? Because you already have a number one receiver and you're about to pay him number one receiver money. Even if it doesn't kick in until 2025, you're about to pay him number one receiver money. No team in the NFL has been bold enough to pay two top wide receivers. And maybe the team that has the $1 million quarterback can get away with it. But in the near future, Brock Purdy's not going to be a $1 million quarterback anymore. And you better not be scrambling to find a number two wide receiver because, listen, with Kyle Shanahan, it might take a year. You better not be scrambling to find a number two wide receiver because Deebo Samuel retired. You can get by with Juwan Jennings and then integrate the rookie in for a while. I don't know how many games Deebo is going to give per season from here on out. If he gives you the full 15-game freight, which is about all you could really ask for at this juncture, that would be a best-case scenario. If he gives you the full 15-game freight, 14-game freight in the regular season, is he going to have anything for you in the postseason? I'd argue he didn't this year, not by his standards. And if he misses a bunch of time in the regular season, are you even going to make the postseason? Now is the time to move on. It's better to be a year too early than a year too late. And I think that in a year from now, we will not be talking about Deebo Samuel as a guy who can land a first-round draft pick in return. But I do think we'll be talking about Brandon Ayuk as a clear-cut number one because he already is. And the offense with Brock Purdy pushing the ball to the perimeter, pushing the ball deep, is feeding the ball to the X receiver, the true Kyle Shanahan offense. Getting a great Z receiver opposite of him, you already have one. But I think you're not asking for one of these guys at the end of the first round to be a number one. Not immediately. You're asking for them to be in, block well, be a number two. Keon Coleman makes all the sense in the world out of Florida State. I don't know if he'll be there at 31. Did run like a 4.6 40, so maybe he will be. But Keon Coleman is big and strong and physical. He's like a George Pickens. He can be your number two. He can be your number two. Is it bold? Is it brash? Is it maybe a bit too aggressive? Absolutely. But I'd rather be that in the sake of maybe expanding your Super Bowl window than going all the way in on this next season, because that's about all you can really count on. I think the window is 2 years, but this next season is all you can truly count on. And by the way, this next season is not looking so optimistic, at least as we stand here 4 days into NFL free agency. I'd love to say that the 49ers look like they're going back to the Super Bowl. The NFC is weak. I'm not the biggest guy on the Lions. The Packers are going to be on the come up, but are we really thinking the Packers are going to come up that much? You can look at the 49ers and say they're still the team to beat. I think you can get rid of Deebo Samuel and you can still say that. I don't think the NFC is all that impressive, especially with Minnesota out of the picture now for all intents and purposes. Is Atlanta really a contender? I love their offensive weapons. I mean, Kirk Cousins is coming off an Achilles injury. Who are the teams to beat? It's San Francisco, Detroit, and the Green Bay Packers. Same as it ever was. And the Niners are, don't show up, don't have Steve Wilkes as their defensive coordinator. So maybe they'll be in a lot better position to take advantage of those two teams a little bit earlier on in the game. The point is, I'd rather be a year too early than a year too late with Deebo Samuel. And right now, while there is interest, while teams are calling, while teams do think Deebo Samuel is still a number one receiver, I'd take him up on the offer as best you could. But, the Niners have shown that they're willing to move on. Eric Armstead's gone. He's not coming back. Now, Eric Armstead and Deebo Samuel are not one and the same. But it does show that, hey, you got to keep moving forward here. And the 49ers looked at Eric Armstead and they said, we're going to pay you how much to give us how much, that's not a good calculation for us. We're going to ask for you to take a pay cut. He says no. That means it's time for us to move on. I'm not saying they go and ask Deebo Samuel for take a pay cut because he sure as hell wouldn't let him. I'm saying, Deebo Samuel 2 years ago was asking for a trade. It was all part of the contract negotiations, things like this, but he's thought about playing for somebody other than San Francisco before. And I think if teams are interested in giving up something of serious value, the price has to be right. The 49ers have to take advantage of the opportunity, strike while the iron's hot, get while the getting's good, and trade Deebo Samuel, who will not be their number one receiver, to a team that needs a number one receiver and get a number one back in the process. And if we want to add ones to this, all Deebo Samuel's changing his number to number one. And aesthetically, I don't want to see that. So let him be on another team. It mentioned real fast, the offseason has not gone well for the 49ers. Free agency has not gone well for the 49ers so far. It got worse yesterday. I mean, I can like the Malik Collins trade. I do. I think that's a good trade. He's your starting defensive tackle. Is it optimized at that position? No, but he's your starting defensive tackle. And that's not something you had going into Wednesday. So there's a win. I also thought that the 49ers had their starting weak side linebacker by signing Eric Kendricks. And I thought that was a really shrewd, positive move. Shows what I know because it didn't actually happen. Eric Kendricks gets a call from Mike Zimmer, his former defensive coordinator with the Minnesota Vikings. And he says, hey, I'd like you to come to the Dallas Cowboys. We'll probably make you a starter here. And he goes, hell yeah, let's do it, brother. And he spurns the 49ers, the team he had an agreement with. I can confirm that for sure. And he spurns the 49ers to go to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, good on Eric Kendricks. Do whatever the hell you need to do. And until pen hits the paper, you're not beholden to anybody. I have no problem with Eric Kendricks backing out of his commitment. I do have a bit of an issue with the 49ers not getting that commitment as lock solid as it could have been. I do have a bit of an issue with the 49ers not getting pen to paper on Wednesday, the day that the league season started, and you could put pen to paper. I do have a bit of an issue now with the 49ers defense as it stands because, as I've said ad nauseum all week, I don't like the way that they handled the defensive end position. It will pass. You can get by. You have defensive ends now. That's not something they had on Sunday, at least opposite of Nick Bosa. But I don't think that was optimized. I think Malik Collins is a nice pickup. I think that he can play one technique for the 49ers. I think that he will be a positive player for this team, but I don't think that he's better than Eric Armstead. I don't think that you've optimized at that position either, though at least you have something better than passable, and I think it's better than the defensive end situation. But you don't have a number two corner, and now you don't have a starting weak side linebacker for this season. And Jalen Graham is on the roster, and I like Jalen Graham, but I'd like to have somebody that I've seen do it at the NFL level, at a high level, even if his best football is behind him, because it's a weird position. It's not just a weird position in terms of playing next to Fred Warner and being in a cover 3 defense. It's a weird position in that you know that you're not actually the starter. For whenever Dre Greenlaw comes back, they're going to try to start him again because he's Dre Greenlaw, and he's awesome, and he's juice, and he's the most fun player on the 49ers defense to watch. Dre Greenlaw is the starting will linebacker. The problem is Dre Greenlaw has a torn Achilles too. And so I don't know when Dre Greenlaw is going to come back. Even the most optimistic schedules say that Dre Greenlaw is probably going to miss a couple of weeks to start the regular season. And I don't know if Dre Greenlaw is ever going to be the player that we know Dre Greenlaw to be once he does come back. It's an Achilles injury. It's incredible that anyone can come back from them. The modern medicine marvels that we have at our disposal. But you need a weak side linebacker. And so now the 49ers are almost a week in. I mean, they're well more than a week in. This legal tampering period is a pile of shit. Regardless, they're a week into when they can talk to players, when they can start rebuilding their team. And they're worse at defensive tackle. They're worse at, maybe they're even at defensive end, but they've paid a lot more for these defensive ends than what they had. I like Cleve Farrell. I would have loved to have seen him come back at 2.5. You don't have a clear number two corner unless you're riding with Ambry Thomas again, in which case, good luck to you. And you don't have a starting weak side linebacker. That's 2 out of the 4 questions you came into free agency with are still open-ended, still unanswered. And the 2 that you have answered, you haven't done really that much of a satisfactory fashion. I know the spin doctors are working on this 49ers defensive line saying this is going to be awesome. And I like the upside of a Yetur Gross-Matos, but he's 4 years into the league, and he hasn't done it yet. He has had NFL coaching for 4 years, and he doesn't have any technique. I mean, Chris Kasarek's got his work cut out for him with him. You paid that guy $9 million. You made a $9 million bet on a guy who may not have it. He's got all the athleticism in the world, but he might not be able to play at the NFL level, at the level that you need him to play at. Leonard Floyd's best football is absolutely behind him. I am not bullish on Leonard Floyd. I'm probably on the very low end of the spectrum when it comes to Leonard Floyd. I don't know what it is he does at a high level anymore because his pass rush moves are not what they used to be. He's lost a step or two, and half of his game was stepping. And he's not a good run stopper. He's always been sleight of frame. He's got long arms. That's nice. Even if he sets an edge, you can still get around him because he doesn't tackle well. So 2 spots you don't feel great about. You're not as good as you were, or at best you're even, but you overpaid. And 2 spots are wide open. So maybe going forward and saying, hey, trade Deebo Samuel after June 1st is just way too aggressive. But at the same time, I look at this team and I go, this is not going to be as good of a team unless some dramatic things happen here, like getting a number 2 corner and adding a weak side linebacker and adding maybe another defensive tackle or defensive end in the draft. Like, unless some dramatic things happen between now and Labor Day, this team is appreciably worse, at least on defense. And if that defense is going to take a step back, that means the offense has to take a step forward. Where's the offense to go with a step forward? Brock Purdy was an MVP candidate last year. Christian McCaffrey was an MVP candidate last year. Brandon Ayuk was incredible last year. Where's the offense to go if they need to take a step forward? It was the best offense in the NFL. It was a historically good offense. And that unit needs to take a further step forward. No, it seems to me as if the 49ers are just going to take a step back because their defense took a step back. And if you're already stepping back, you might as well maximize the return on a player like Deebo Samuel. That's 27 minutes of me explaining my thoughts on it. Love your thoughts on it. Hit me up in the comments. By the way, if you haven't subscribed, you can subscribe to the podcast feed. We put this up immediately afterwards. And please, if you're watching on X, subscribe over on YouTube because, X doesn't pay squat. Not that YouTube's paying me anything, but at least in theory. Do we want to talk some Warriors here? Do we want to talk about the Dubs loss last night? Because about a week or so ago, might have been even more than a week, I wrote, hey, just focus on that 9-10 game. The season's all about the 9-10 game. It's all about that game against the Lakers. And if the Warriors had any priority, and this was before Steph twisted his ankle, it should be make sure that 9-10 game is at home. Well, that was probably a bit too aggressive on my end. Maybe I was a week too early as opposed to a week too late there with that column. But that 8-9 game is just looking the Warriors right in the face. It's hard to imagine a circumstance in which they get to the 8th seed in the Western Conference. Because Dallas played like shit last night. Good defense against Luka Doncic, no question about it. Dallas missed a ton of open threes. They were getting anything they wanted at the basket. That's pretty par for the course for them. But Dallas wanted to give the Warriors that game, and the Warriors had no chance of taking it. They couldn't make anything. They played good defense. You love the effort from the young guys. I didn't dislike anything that I really saw on the floor, but they just had such a talent deficit across the board that it was going to be almost impossible for them to win. Dallas would have had to go above and beyond to give them that game, and the Warriors would have actually had to play above and beyond to win that game. I thought Kuminga was really, really good. He's still a kid. This is what I'm talking about when I say he's not a number 2 yet. Jonathan Kuminga had mistakes in that game, which are totally understandable, totally forgivable. But that's not the game when he's a number 1 in that game. He can't make those mistakes. It's unfair to levy that against him. Like, you're the number 1 tonight. You can't make any mistakes. He's too young to really shine in that role because he's too young to shine in the number 2 role just yet. He's not consistent enough on a play-to-play basis. He is a spectacular player. He is going to be an absolute all-world player in the short term, like next couple of years. Next year, he should be your number 2, no doubt about it, with a bullet, because you're seeing the progress that he's made just in season. What happens with an off season? What happens as he keeps getting older, keeps figuring out how to play this game? It's the sky's the limit for this kid. But today, in the here and now, he's a number 3. Klay Thompson is a number 3. If you need any more evidence to that, look at last night. You have a lot of tertiary options. You have Draymond Green holding everything up on defense, and their defense isn't all that great. Way too much dribble penetration. And that was against San Antonio, and it was certainly against Dallas. They turned in a good defensive performance last night by their standards. And again, with the talent, they should get some more credit than I'm giving them. But here we are. They turned in a good defensive performance last night, and they still gave up too much dribble penetration. Draymond Green is only going to change so much of that. Now, he'll facilitate better. I mean, not having Draymond Green is a big deal. Not having Steph Curry is a massive deal because now you don't have your number 1 offensive option. And that number 1 offensive option is so great that he can make the tertiary options, be that Andrew Wiggins if he decides to show up, be that Klay Thompson if his legs are cooperating, be that Jonathan Kuminga, who is the consistent one of those 3 despite being 21 years old. He can pull them up and make them look like number 2s. He's that good. Rising tide lifts all ships. Steph Curry's a king tide. At the same time, man, it's just going to be too difficult for them with the way that things are going now. I think they have 18 games left for them to get into the 8th seed. I know that they still have a game with the Mavericks. They needed to win both of their games against the Mavericks in order to reasonably expect that they could jump them, because Dallas is a very talented team, but they want to lose games. They're begging to lose games. Right now, the Warriors are 3.5 games behind them. They're a game behind the Lakers for the 9th seed. 34-31, given everything that's happened this season, isn't so bad. The West is just flipping brutal. It's absolutely brutal. I mean, the Phoenix Suns, who at times play spectacular basketball, they're not a deep team. I don't know if they're a well-coached team. I don't think they are. Sorry to Frank Vogel. But there are times when it is just get the hell out of the way. No one's beating these guys. That's the 7 seed. They're in the play-in tournament as things currently stand. I mean, New Orleans might want to give it back a little bit. Sacramento might want to give it back a little bit, though Sacramento's won 2 straight. But I think your 1 through 4 are locked in, even with the Clippers coming back a smidge. Denver takes over number 1. You got 1 through 4 locked in place. I think the Pelicans have shown enough to not think that they're just going to have the bottom fall out here in the last few weeks. Sacramento and Phoenix will keep battling for 6-7. That's going to be a lot of fun. Maybe Dallas gets in on that action. They're a half game back of both of those teams. I have a lot more faith in Sacramento than I do in Dallas, even though the talent disparity, I think, leans towards Dallas. And Phoenix, obviously, above both of those. I mean, you just look at the standings. You think about how this season's going. Steve Kerr said after last night's game, I think we got a real run in us still. Steve, you've been saying it all season. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. Steph comes back. Maybe it's hunky-dory for a week. Then what changes? I mean, Draymond Green just gets called out of last night's game. You got an old team, and you have a too young team. And somewhere in the middle is Andrew Wiggins, and he doesn't show up most nights. I mean, I thought he played okay last night. I'm not going to knock Andrew Wiggins' performance last night, but it certainly wasn't enough. It certainly wasn't enough, and his confidence is clearly very fragile on the court. He had a bunny that he missed, and you just go, hey, stuff happens. And he just moped for the next 3 possessions. It was kind of a tough watch. You need him to play with force every possession. You need him to play like Jonathan Kuminga. Jonathan Kuminga, maybe he is too young and too dumb to realize that he can't play this way, but until someone stops him, I'd keep doing it. You want to talk about a guy playing with force, Jonathan Kuminga. Brandon Podziemski plays with force. Trace Jackson-Davis plays with force. These are guys I don't need to look at the box score to know that they're making an impact on the game. Andrew Wiggins, you're most of the time looking at the box score because you forgot he was out there. And I'm belaboring an old point here. But when you got a team that's really old on one end, which means that they could get injured at any point, just the reality of the situation, and a team that's very young, which means that they're inconsistent, even if these are 2 of the most consistent rookies I've ever seen, and Kuminga has gone leaps and bounds, you need the guys who are supposedly in their prime to come through. And the Warriors have like 2 of those guys. One of them's Wiggins, the other's Gary Payton II, whose offensive game is fallen off a cliff, as you would somewhat expect. He's not playing his true position, which is somehow power forward anymore. That's Jonathan Kuminga's job. So I'm looking at the standings now. Understanding what this team is about and how they're going to go about their business. They need to go on like a 9 or a 10 game win streak here. They need to win like 16. No, I mean, they'd have to win 14 of their last 18 games to even have a chance to get out of the play-in tournament. And to get up to number 8, that might only get them to 8, like 14 of the next 18 games. 12 might get them to 8 in just an absolutely diabolical world. I just don't see any way that they're not playing this 9-10 game. And if that's the case, Saturday's game is absolutely huge against the Lakers. Steph Curry looks like he's going to be back for that game. Obviously huge. But Adam Silver's already Sal. You can just hear the league office working all the way over here in Alameda. You can hear the league office in Manhattan working because Lakers Warriors play-in game. Winner goes on, loser goes home. 1 game playoff between those two teams, the moneymakers, the two moneymakers in this league. Yeah, that is a pipe dream for the NBA league office. And it's kind of a nightmare for the Golden State Warriors. We can get into all of the ramifications of being a 9 or a 10 seed down the line. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it. But yeah, I can already hear the NBA league office building out all the promotional stuff that they're going to do, all the ads that they can sell on a 9-10 game between they won't put the seedings anywhere near the names. It's going to be Warriors, Lakers, win or go home, and you will not know that they are the 9 and the 10 seed in the Western Conference. But this notion that the Warriors are just going to go on some run and pull themselves out of the 10 seed, I think it's a pipe dream. By the way, if the Warriors do think that they have that run in them, maybe don't use it in the regular season. Maybe hold on to that. Maybe wait until the actual play-in tournament, which you're not getting out of, to unleash whatever it is you think you have on the rest of the league. Because you get into the tournament. Listen, Minnesota is not going to have Karl Anthony Towns. They say he might come back. I just doubt Karl Anthony Towns is coming back, and that makes me doubt the Minnesota Timberwolves more than I already doubted them. Oklahoma City is very young. I think that can work to their advantage, probably more so than most. But it's also kind of a detriment. That place is going to be bumping in the playoffs, but it can also be a detriment. They haven't been there before. Experience does matter. Maybe not as much as the Warriors wish it did, but it does matter. The Clippers have James Harden and Paul George. Sorry, can't bet on them. I think they're the best team in the West. Can't bet on them. Oh, and by the way, Kawhi Leonard's back could flare up at any moment, or his knee, or his hand, or whatever. A guy went through pregame warmups, his back flared up, and he left the arena. So you can't trust that guy. I don't think the Pelicans or the Kings are winning a title. Maybe the Suns could. I think a lot of things would have to break their way because I don't think they're a complete team. They got a hell of a top 3, but they're not a complete team. I mean, Denver's a juggernaut. Denver has 20 losses, and 10 of those are them just deciding they don't want to play today. Denver is incredible. But you look at the Warriors. Warriors at their best can play with a lot of these teams. And when the Warriors won the title in 2022, the bracket broke entirely their way. Entirely their way. The one tough angle they had in 2022 was playing the Memphis Grizzlies and Ja Morant because they couldn't stop a point guard to save their life that season. And then Ja Morant twists his knee, and suddenly everything's A-okay for the Warriors again. That was a very contentious series. I don't think it's talked about enough. Taylor Jenkins was spewing some nonsense. He was going full Daily Dieter, like night in, night out with those press conferences. That was a crazy series because Memphis thought they had it in the bag after like 2 games. And then I want to go back to that. I like that kind of basketball. That's the good shit. Warriors are going to be in the play-in tournament. Okay. I think that, while they held higher expectations at the start of this season, halfway through the season, if you said they're going to make the play-in tournament, you go, I guess we'll take it. Given how poorly they were playing, I guess we'll take it. But even after all of this burst, even after they've played their best basketball this season and all that, they're still the 10 seed. That's how good the West is. But I look at a lot of these teams, and it's like Steph Curry, Draymond Green back. If you're playing your best basketball late, they can beat a lot of these teams. Not Denver, but they can beat a lot of these teams. Maybe not the Clippers if the Clippers are there. But who knows if they'll show up. They can beat a lot of these teams. So if the Warriors do, in fact, think that they have some burst, don't use it so that you can overtake the Lakers and the Mavericks. Maybe the Lakers, but not, don't try to make that, use all your energy so that you can get to the 8th seed. Use all your energy so that you can get through the play-in tournament. And then you can get into the playoffs, and now you're really cooking. Now you got a little momentum behind you, and you go full Miami Heat a year or two ago. Can't remember which one it was because, well, the East is looking okay too. All right, that's it for today. We'll talk again tomorrow. I got some thoughts on the Giants I want to share tomorrow. We'll do our 3 up, 3 down on the Merc website. We got some shorts and stuff coming up on the game day YouTube feed. So those should just show up. You don't really need to subscribe for that, but you should subscribe to 49ers Game Day. And you should definitely not watch our live stream where I was from yesterday, where I was like, oh, Eric Hendricks is such a great signing. That aged like milk and not the ultra processed ones that you got these days. They last like 3 months now. It's incredible. Regardless, don't watch that live stream. Watch all of our clips from it that we've cut up. So subscribe to 49ers Game Day. And if you haven't already and you've enjoyed any of this, even a second of it, subscribe on YouTube. The link is in the X feed, whatever the hell, how you found it. And then, it's also available on YouTube. All right. I'm going to go watch the world burn around my Deebo Samuel column. Lovely traction it's getting already. Very excited for all the angry emails and text messages I'm going to get. If you want to get in on that, you can as well. Those are easy enough to find. And we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.